Today I would like to talk about the science of eugenics and also the way it affected American culture and literature. I would like to bring up the role of what I identified as a eugenic satire in the period between World War I and World War II, and also maybe to share with you some thoughts about what I think are the remains of eugenic thinking in contemporary world, the world of science and the world of culture. So what is eugenics? Eugenics, this is the science of better breeding roughly from the 1880s up to the 1950s that was developed as a way of trusting the power of social engineering to create a new perfect society, new perfect race. That science was developed by Sir Francis Galton, the nephew of Charles Darwin, and he was conducting research examining genealogical pedigree of eminent British men, and he decided that genius and hence intelligence was hereditary and as such needs to be protected by society. So he decided that we need the new science, the science that would promote the development of the racial leaders. And he took two words from Greek, one eu, well, and the other one genos, born, and he combined them together and he formed that new science, the science of eugenics, the purpose of which is to deal with, this is his formulation, deal with all the influences that improve the inborn qualities of race. And as such, eugenics from its inception was a racial science, the science of race improvement, and also a racist science. Because what is behind the idea of eugenics is the fear that the white man is losing its grip on the world. Galton is expressing that anxiety that is manifested and shared by a number of scholars, a number of thinkers of that time at the end of the 19th century, such as Arthur de Gobineau, that are expressing anxiety over what they believe is Western civilization going under. In the American context, eugenics is part of the debate, national debate, about the shape of future American nation. So we're talking about the beginning of the 20th century when the United States, due to an incredible demographic change and also due to new technologies that are evolving, new pattern of life, it has to redefine itself as a nation. So at that time, the major question that is being asked in the United States revolves around the shape of the United States. Should we define ourselves as a kind of a civic democracy? And we uphold the belief that is encoded in the Declaration of Independence that all people are born equal. You trust in the ideas of fraternity and brotherhood regardless racial affiliation, or the other way around. Should we redefine ourselves and maybe revert to an older model of a nation that is based on the model of a family? So we're talking about the model of racial kinship. And eugenics was the science that provided some kind of an answer to this debate. It suggested that we Americans, and in the American context, but of course that was how eugenics wanted to be perceived all over the world, we are thinking about the nation as one big racial family. And top intellectuals are becoming eugenicists. They're interested in eugenics. You know, they are thinking that eugenics is this new visionary, optimistic science, and that informs all other sciences emerging at that time. So we're talking about the science of anthropology, sociology, the science of medical sciences, and psychology. We have top intellectuals, top American professors that are identifying themselves with the discourse of eugenics. We have such names as David Starr Jordan, who is a professor of Stanford University. We have Professor Herbert Goddard, who is a psychologist and who popularizes, is responsible for promotion IQ testing in the United States. We have Lothrop Stoddard, who is a professor of law and history. So we are talking about top intellectuals, and what is interesting is that they are sometimes very progressive thinkers, because what is interesting about the science of eugenics is that it has the power to attract both conservative thinkers, social conservatives, and those that are socially progressive. So they believe in the power of this new visionary science to promote social uplift. They believe in its power to ameliorate class differences and to provide answers to economic problems. What is also intriguing about the science of eugenics is that it's using the kind of irrational rhetoric. All eugenist thinkers at that time positioned themselves as objective scientists that are not given to impressionistic thinking, that are not being prejudiced or biased, that they don't exhibit any kind of a racial bias, that they are being very objective, that they work with data, they work with statistics, and their research that they conduct is extremely scientific. And I think that celebration of eugenics as science is one of the factors that accounts for its popularity all over the world and also in the United States. When we think about the United States after World War I and before World War II, this is the country that still struggles with, for example, the ban on the teaching of the theory of evolution. This is the case, for example, in the state of Tennessee with the famous monkey or Scopes trial of 1925. So we have intellectuals that are using the science of evolution also to promote the science of eugenics, and the other way around. The two are inextricably intertwined. So it is believed that if you are a progressive intellectual and you subscribe to the theory of evolution, the logical step forward is to use the science of eugenics. What are the consequences of the science of eugenics? There are both negative aspects and positive aspects. And eugenics at that time, so we're talking roughly about the 1920s, is identifying as having those two poles, yes, that negative and the positive. So what are the negative aspects of eugenics, consequences of eugenics? This is the introduction of legislation that aims at controlling the immigrant population coming to the United States. So we are talking about, for example, the introduction of the Johnson-Reed Act in 1924 with the aim of curbing the immigration of immigrants coming from Southern and Eastern Europe. So this is that kind of undesirable type of an immigration. This is one of the consequences, yes, that eugenics upholds the nativist fear of being populated by the undesirable immigrants that are other than the traditional North European immigrants. Another consequence of eugenics is the introduction of sterilization statutes. From 1907 in the state of Indiana, there are several states that introduce sterilization as a way of controlling the undesirable population. Then another important consequence of eugenics is the endorsement of racial purity statutes in the American South. These are anti-miscegenation laws that are being introduced in the American South at that time, and they are being upheld by eugenicists because they subscribe to the belief that races shouldn't mix. That one of the worst consequences of the march of Western civilization is the fact that races started to mix. We have mixed marriages, and eugenicists warn against that. And they believe that those laws that are being introduced in the American South, they are racial integrity laws. This is exactly the expression that is being used by eugenicists at that time, and those laws should be upheld. And we have also what is identified as positive eugenics. Now, positive eugenics is an attempt to spread the eugenic gospel so that it crosses the lecture halls, it gets out of colleges, and it enters the family. Yes? So there is an attempt to teach the public about eugenic laws. We have a number of initiatives that are being developed, especially in the 1920s, by the American Eugenics Society. And these are, for example, fitter family contests that are being held in American fairs. We have eugenic pavilions that are being set up with the purpose of teaching the audience about eugenic marriages. We have the best baby contest, when babies are being examined with the purpose of identifying the model perfect baby. We have also other consequences, such as better medical care, which is a positive aspect of eugenics. And this is what is so confusing to people about eugenics at that time. We have the development and more awareness about prenatal care that is necessary if you want to have better nation. We have the improvement of housing conditions, because there is the awareness that there is a link between the way people live and the shape of the nation. And also we have the development of the conservation movement. There is also the awareness that nature is important for the future American nation. Another thing that I would like also to bring up is the link between the science of eugenics and that of social Darwinism. Science of eugenics is unthinkable without the theory of evolution and that an attempt to translate the theory of evolution into social sciences, which is given the name of social Darwinism. Eugenics believes that the whole society, which is considered to be the race, is organized in a hierarchical manner with racial leaders on top. And then we have those that are of less skills, not that well equipped to lead the nation. And we are reaching the bottom, and these are the so-called racial degenerates. So this is that kind of a tree, as that race perceived as a family tree with the top branches, and these are the racial leaders, these are the political leaders, intellectuals, and we can measure their intelligence. And we have also those that are at the very bottom, and we can tell that they are those racial degenerates because they are prone to poverty. So eugenics has that economic explanation. They are given to poverty, disability, addiction, so we have alcoholics that are being considered to be dysgenic. We have promiscuous women, so prostitutes, they are considered to be also degenerates. We have people that carry with themselves what is considered to be recessive germplasm, or the term that is being used at that time is that of attained. And these are people that now we would identify them as carrying a genetic disease, that is genetically transmitted disease. They are considered to be degenerate too, when we use that eugenic terminology. We have also another interesting category, and this is the category of feeble-minded people. Feeble-minded people are those that don't do very well on IQ tests, that don't score really well. And that definition of feeble-mindedness is kind of vague. Even eugenicists themselves at that time are troubled by how vague it is. They still use that term to refer to the population that they consider not to be very, very bright. While thinking about a history of eugenics, we have to consider the kind of an ethical bias of eugenics. Eugenics was the science that upheld the belief in races, in racial stratification, in the hierarchy of races, and as such as was racist to the core. That was the science that promoted racialism, that is thinking about humanity in terms of races, but also racism, that is promoting the belief that it is possible to divide humankind according to their racial performance. It was the science that was used by white supremacists and the so-called Nordics in the United States. That was the science that was used by white supremacists in England or the Nordics in Germany. That was the science that is responsible for, ultimately, for providing scientific justification for the carnage and genocide of the whole civilian population, of Jewish Holocaust. This is the science that is responsible for sterilization and sterilizations of numerous people, both in Nazi Germany, but also in countries such as Sweden, where sterilizations were being conducted till the 1960s, or in the United States, where we have the record of sterilizations being carried out in the state, for example, of California, as late as the 1960s. So eugenics is that science, this evil science, that is promoting hatred, that is promoting racial tribalism, that is eventually leading to carnage and genocide. But at the same time, what is kind of troubling about eugenics is that it promoted that positive aspect that I mentioned, that is medical developments, better medical care for the civilians. It promoted fitness movement, dietary movement, the conservation movement in the United States. And I think that the fact that eugenics used the kind of rhetoric that is the rhetoric of hatred, on one hand, resentment, nativism, racial anxiety on one hand, but on the other hand, it talked about utopia. It talked about national social utopia. It expressed visionary hope for the better future. I think that combination of the two poles of eugenics is responsible for the popularity of the discourse of eugenics before World War II, not only in Nazi Germany, but in the States and in many countries of Western civilization.